without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome him here, who has flown in all the way from London. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Nikesh Shukla! All right. Welcome. Welcome to Comic-Con. Have fun. Rudo, over to you.
Thank you. The seats take a while. All right, Nikesh. A big round of applause before we get started.
Hi, how's it going? Great, good.
Louder? No. You guys were very loud when you were saying comic and con, so I don't know, yeah. Well, okay, let's get started very quickly, right? This is your first Comic-Con on the other side as a writer. Let's start with that first. How has it been?
Yeah, I feel like I grew up going to Comic-Cons in London, and they were the place where I found my people. Because, believe it or not, in the 90s, we weren't the cool kids. Like, the MCU has helped usher in a new era where the weirdos and the outsiders and the geeks and the nerds were actually the cool kids now. But when I was growing up, we weren't. And I would go to these Comic-Cons and, cosplay as Star Trek characters and Star Wars and Marvel characters. And now, look at it. It's like thousands and thousands of people. It's really cool. And this is my first con as a writer, which is amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, since you said this is your first Comic-Con as a writer, I want to talk about how you became one. Like, what was the journey? Why take up writing, right? Could you tell us more about that? How did you get into all of that?
Well, believe it or not, my sparkling personality means I didn't really have very many friends as a teenager, but my best friends were comic book heroes, and so my origin story is actually because of Spider-Man. Like, when I was growing up, my best friend Junaid and I would spend all of our time in the comic shop, and we couldn't afford the comics, so we'd sit at the back of the shop and read them for free, and then we could buy one issue each, and we'd always try and buy different ones. But I would have like part 3 of 5 or part 2 of 5. I would never have the full run, and so the way I taught myself to write was I would just finish these stories in notebooks. I would just write my own versions of what would happen next in part 4 and 5. And so Spider-Man fan fiction was my journey into writing. And then after a while you start to come up with your own characters, and then once you come up with your own characters, they start to have their own lives, and then you start to tell your own stories. But it's now full circle because now I'm writing for Marvel, which is really cool.
Right, but before we get to that, and that's the main event, right? I want to talk about, you said you started writing fan fiction, right? But a lot of the work you've been doing has been a very serious, you've done young adult novels, you've edited, I think, the Great Immigration Stories, I'm forgetting the title right now.
But the Good Immigrant.
The Good Immigrant,
yeah.
Not the Great Immigrant, the Good Immigrant. So how did that happen? And then we'll go into the transition.
Yeah, I was always meant to be a comedy writer. Like I was writing sitcoms, and my first 2 novels were comedy books. But the thing about being a writer is, especially a writer who was obsessed with James Baldwin when I was growing up, is there's a moral clarity, there's a moral responsibility that comes with being a writer, because all art is political. And so in 2016, during the rubbish around the Brexit referendum in the UK, I decided I was going to do something to kind of combat that narrative. And so I put together this collection of essays called The Good Immigrant, and it kind of blew up in this big way. Like, it had essays by people like Riz Ahmed, Himesh Patel, Reni Edo-Lodge, all these really, really amazing writers. But that kind of just took over my career for a little bit, and I just found myself becoming an expert, or like someone with opinions about race, which is a strange thing to do, is like talk about racism on a daily basis. It breaks your brain, and I really wanted to come back to comics or come back to writing comedy or writing for fun, and so I had a bunch of years where I was writing a lot of social and political stuff. The reaction to it was either you'd get there's an extreme trolling side to it. Like, I was getting death threats through my door. It resulted in me being awarded an MBE for my services to literature, but I said no, I don't, because I'm not a member of the British Empire, so I refused an MBE. And all of this stuff just was just weighing heavily on me, and I decided I'm going to do something to bring the joy back. And so I had this opportunity to pitch an idea to the editor of all the Spider-Man comics at Marvel, and I got the joy back, you know?
Right, and I really want to talk about that. So, Spider-Man India, right? In 2023, it's been talk of the town. I mean, especially after the movie that came out, right?
Yeah.
So, when you decided to pitch this,
Yeah.
I mean, how did it happen? Did you just go blind pitching that Spider-Man India story? Was there something? I mean, tell me about the process.
Yeah, I mean, so firstly, shout out to the originators who did the original miniseries in 2004, to Jeevan Kang, to Suresh Sitarajan, and to Sharad Devarajan. Like, it was iconic. It was iconic. I remember coming across it in a comic book shop and going, what is this? Looks amazing. I'd never seen anything like it. And it was around the time that Virgin Comics was doing lots of really cool stuff. And so fast forward to last year, just one day I was feeling really depressed.
Okay.
Which is most days. And it was this one particular day, it was no particular day, a special day. I just tweeted, one day I want to write a Spider-Man comic. And I didn't think anything of it. And the next day I woke up and I had a private message on Twitter, or X or whatever you want to call it, from a guy called Jamie McKelvey, who's an amazing writer and artist. He did the designs for Captain Marvel and Kamala Khan and all these amazing iconic works, and he said, if you're serious, I can try and make that happen. You should be writing for Marvel. I was like, okay. I had never thought it'd be an actual job that someone can have. And he put me in touch with Nick Lowe, who's the executive editor for Spider-Man comics at Marvel. And the thing about Nick is he's lovely, he's a really lovely guy, but he probably has a lot of people in his inbox every single day saying, please, sir, can I write a Spider-Man comic, sir? Please, sir. And so I thought, I better pitch him something that no one else is pitching him. And I better pitch him something that I want to read, because what's the point of me writing a Spider-Man comic that I think that the fans want? I should pitch something that I want to read. And I was thinking about Pavitra. I think there was probably like an online conversation about whether he might crop up in the next Across the Spider-Verse movie or whatever.
Right.
So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. So I messaged Nick and I said, I would love to meet. I've got a pitch for, hear me out, I want to bring back Spider-Man India. They did this amazing mini-series with him. It was one of the first multiversal spiders in the Spider-Verse. And true to form, that happens in Western popular culture all the time. You try out these new things with characters of color, and then they get sidelined once it works.
Right.
And I want to bring him back, because he's been in the background for ages. And he messaged me back really quickly and said, you know what? He's going to be in the next Spider-Verse movie, and we've been thinking about the same thing, so let's go for it. So I thought, like, what would be a thing that I wanted to read? And so I wanted to do something that was different from the original miniseries, because I wanted to expand the canon, but I also wanted to do, I wanted to have the opportunity to write a classic Spider-Man story, but set in Bombay.
Right.
And I wanted to give Pavitra Prabhakar a classic storyline. So I thought, I'm going friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. That's what I want to do. Why does Spider-Man stand up for his community? Why does Spider-Man do what he does? All the things that I was thinking about myself, like, why do I put myself in front of all of this stuff? Why have I put myself at the forefront of all of this trolling? Why did I do all of this political stuff and it break my brain and all that kind of stuff? So all of those things were just swimming around. And so I came up with this idea of I wanted to talk about Seva and community, and and I thought, who are the two villains who could represent the opposite of a community? And so one is like an evil businessman who's flipping the area to turn into a luxury property, and the other one is a scientist who's obsessed with individualism. Sound like anyone we know out in the world? I don't know, who's to say? But and so Lizard and Earth 50101's version of Kingpin were the ones that I kind of came up with.
Right. Now, you spoke about the character conflict Pavitra Prabhakar has in that comic, and without giving too many spoilers, I mean, I'm sure all of them already have the first issue. So you do have Miles Morales and Peter Parker come in and sort of giving him that lecture, right? How How did you come up with that idea? And was it something Marvel told you, or was that completely your own?
No, that was a gift from Nick Lowe. He said a fun way to maybe reintroduce him is to just put him within the context of the other spiders. And I said, can I write a scene with Peter Parker and Miles Morales? He was like, yeah, if you can make it work, make it work. And I had to sit down. I was already sitting down, but I read the email and then I stood up and I had to sit down on the floor. I had to get as close to the ground as possible because I couldn't believe it. Like, if I could go back in time and tell 13-year-old Nikesh who felt like the whole world was against him and related to Peter Parker because Peter Parker felt like the whole world was against him and shame and guilt dictated his entire life, and every time he tried to do something right, it went wrong. If I could go back, and that's how I felt as a 13-year-old, if I could go back and tell that 13-year-old, you get to write Peter Parker one day, and Peter Parker gets to give life advice to Bhavito, who is like a cipher for you. It brings tears to my eyes just thinking about
Absolutely.
what that meant for me, you know?
It would. It definitely would. Now, I want to come from the writing part to the collaboration part, because
Yeah.
I know you've worked on this title with Abhishek Malsuni and Tadam, right? And these guys have been artists who've worked on our titles, like bunch of these things, and they've been popular for the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
What was it like? How did you identify them? Did you seek them out? How was it working with them?
Well, that was where, the first thing I said to Marvel when they okayed it was, you know, much as I spend a lot of time in India, I really want to work with an Indian artist. That's really important to me. And they said, of course, no problem. And they had all of these amazing portfolios, and we went through them, and Abhishek and Tadam just stood out. They were amazing. You know, so working with them was brilliant. Then I got to, you know, Adam Kubert, the God, got to
Yes.
do the covers. Had people like Scott Hanna do the inks, and all these legends. Neeraj Menon did the letters. Like all these absolute legends just brought their A game to this, and it all came from like when I sent the first issue script to Abhishek, he just got it. He got what I was trying to do. He got the vibe of it, and I think what I had not appreciated with comics, because you know I write novels and I write TV and all the rest of it. TV is very collaborative, but it's collaborative in a way that you as the head writer, you as the showrunner, you make all of the choices, you make all of the decisions, and you know, when you're a novelist, you're doing all of it. You're just in your little garret with a candlelight and a glass of whiskey, pounding the keyboard like you think you're Bukowski or whatever. But here, it's a really iterative and iterative process, which I found really fascinating. So, you know, I'd write the script and, you know, work through the edits with Marvel, and then we'd send them to Abhishek or to Tadam, and then they'd do these sort of like very rough outlines and send them back. And, you know, they would then comment on like the panel structure that I'd made, and then we'd readjust it, and then they'd go and pencil them, and then it would come back to me, and then I would get to readjust them, and then it goes away and gets inked and then colored. And then when the letters come in, you realize that, like, because you're working with some of the best artists in the business, they're visually doing the work of the words. So you start them pulling out words, and like it gets the pages then start to breathe. It's brilliant. I loved it. I love like that feeling. It's like it felt like the closest a writer can ever get to jazz.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. I want to do a quick check in terms of how many people have questions for Nikesh right now. I got one there. Any other show of hands? All right, so we're going to come back to this. I'm going to take a final question, then move to Q&A, right? Cool. Final two, actually. I'll get greedy. Now that you've written Spider-Man India, now you compare that to the version you saw in Across the Spider-Verse. What does it feel like? Do you see a difference? Is it the same iteration of that character? What's going through your head?
What I love about the movie version of it, which I had nothing to do with, we had, like, my agent had some conversations about, there was a writer's room, but I think it needed to be in LA, and I couldn't make or whatever, I don't know. But when I saw that version, what I really loved is in the context of the film, he's the happy-go-lucky Spider-Man. He's the joyful Spider-Man. He's the one who isn't so wrecked by trauma yet, and he's so much fun. And Karan Soni does a brilliant job with the voice acting, and I really loved it. And what I really loved about it was different to the version I was doing. The version I was doing was sort of similar to like Peter Parker feeling like the world's on his shoulders, and like isn't that just true to life? Some days you feel really joyful, some days you feel like the world is on your shoulders. So I feel like they're in conversation with each other, and they're parts of the same complicated apple.
Awesome. Now, I want to talk about what's next for you, what's next for Spider-Man India, and finally, I know you're here. Do you want to tell the audience about your booth and how they can come down to your booth and get their copies signed? So,
sure. So, I mean, in terms of book stuff, I'm doing a kids illustrated book series called The Council of Good Friends, which is really great. And I'm working on a new YA series, which will be an original superhero series, which will be fun. But in terms of my comic book stuff, I've got the bug. I need to do more. So Tadam and I have just done a new Pavitra story for Free Comic Book Day.
Oh, and nice.
Which is in May. So that will be a brand new standalone story. There is talk of us doing another mini-series. I mean, feel free to go on Twitter or Instagram and demand a brand new mini-series as soon as this finishes.
That sounds good, yeah.
Tag Nick Lowe in it. Don't say I told you to. And also, I got the opportunity to write a backup story for Amazing Spider-Man Annual next year.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Which was this whole thing, being given this world and this IP and this canon to put my own stamp on has been one of the greatest honors of my life, and to write a Peter Parker story was amazing. I loved it. And I've got many more plans for Pavitra. People keep telling me that there's a Mysterio six-armed Mysterio panel.
Yeah, I see that one.
What we kind of want to play on that. Venom was teased in the original miniseries. I want to explore what that might look like. So I've got plans basically, but I've got so a bunch of us are here who were involved in the book. So Dolly, who did a couple of the variants, is here, and Dadam is here. They've both got stands, and I've got a stand. We're selling comic books. So issues 2, 3, 4, and 5 aren't available in India yet, which is perplexing to me. I have been on at Marvel to try and understand why that's not happening. But I basically bought up the last stock that I could find in the UK to bring it here. So please come and buy some books from me. As soon as I've made my money back on what I spent on those books, all the profits are being donated to medical aid for Palestine. Because those kids in Gaza, those people in Gaza need medical aid urgently, and I want to do whatever I can.
Right.
But there's also posters. You've got a free copy of a Comic-Con exclusive issue 1 in your bags. I'll sign that. And don't think of, if we try and charge you money for any of it, don't think of me as a capitalist. Think of it as money that's going to a good cause, because I'm donating it to Medical Aid Palestine. But also, just come and say hi. I want to meet the people. It's so rare. It's so rare to meet the fans of the world.
Right.
And just be in a space where we can just chat about organic web shooters versus mechanical web shooters.
Yeah.
And who'd win.
Quickly, which one do you prefer? Organic or mechanical?
You know what? I quite like the era of Amazing Spider-Man that had organic web shooters, because there's only so many times that he can have a storyline where he runs out of web fluid.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to throw it open to the audience. I know I had a question back there. Can we get a mic to her quickly, please? Yeah.
Hello. एक छोटा सा क्वेश्चन है. I might be wrong, but I heard कि आपका दिल्ली कॉमिक कॉन में फर्स्ट डे है, right? So एक सिंगल क्वेश्चन है मेरा, how is it different from the other Comic Con you found it, and what's the one thing that you will remember every time whenever you got to know about Delhi Comic Con?
Good question. Firstly, the food here is better than any other Comic Con I've ever been to. Shout out to the food vendors. Look, across the world, every Comic Con I've been to, a couple in America, I've been to loads in the UK. Everyone is just so in it. Everyone's just so hyped to be there. I love the cosplay. The two dudes you're sitting next to, shout out to you guys. We met yesterday. The cosplay's been amazing. I'm hoping to see more Pavitras walking around today. But the thing that I'll remember is they're look. Let's be real. Like, I don't want to turn this into a political thing. I've already said a lot of political stuff, but the Marvel universe, which expands an infinite amount of multiverses and an infinite amount of characters, has what, 2, maybe 3 South Asian characters. Miss Marvel being one of them, Bhavitra being another one. He's not even in Earth
616.
616.
Right? Yeah.
My brain went blank for a second. So to see what that means for young kids, because like, I'm an ex-youth worker. I used to work in youth clubs until like 2 or 3 years ago. I'm a father, I am a teacher, I teach creative writing, and I write for kids and I write for teenagers. And to see what an Indian Spider-Man means to young kids is just phenomenal. Like, it really makes my day. So every time like kids and their parents are coming up and they're like, this looks amazing, it really, like, it makes my life.
Right, I think we can take one more question. Sorry, one more, and then we'll can it.
But come to the booth and you can ask me 3 questions.
Yeah, you can take 3 questions at the booth. So.
I'm joking.
Hello, sir. It's been a privilege asking you this question. I'm a big fan. And I wanted to ask that when you come up with a story, do you come to the conclusion first, or you just start writing and by the end you just go with the flow and just see where the story goes?
Oh, mate, you've just asked a creative writing teacher a craft question about structure. Strap in, guys. I've got an hour lecture on this. No, what I always do is I always like to know where it starts and like to know where it ends. And the middle is the fun bit. Figuring out the middle is like the fun bit. But if you know where it starts and you know where it ends, and you know that like the story arc, the emotional story arc that you're trying to tell, you have to know the moment that emotional story arc starts and the moment it finishes. And so those 2 are always very fixed points for me. And like the figuring out in the middle is the end. So because the start and the end are always in conversation with each other. If the start and the end don't match, then you haven't got a story.
Thanks a lot, sir. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
There's one question there. Please, can she ask one? She was one of the first people to put her hand up. I know they're trying.
Hello, sir. Big fan. And only yesterday we both read Spider-Man India. So when you were thinking of Spider-Man India, keeping in mind the differences in US culture and Indian culture, what is the stark difference you have envisioned about Peter Parker and between Pavitra Prabhakar and Peter Parker? And my second question would be, as and when on screen can we expect Pavitra Prabhakar sooner?
Yeah, the live action version.
And would you give a guest appearance in that movie like Stanley the Legend used to?
I mean, I'd love there to be a standalone Pavitra thing. I mean, they're doing a Spider-Man noir show at the moment, so it's not completely unheard of. The thing that I think is really important to remember is like teenage boys. This like whether they're Peter Parker or Pavitra or Miles Morales, there's something within them that is universal, and that's a really important thing. But the cultural specificity and the universality being a teenage boy, the clash between those 2 things, that's what I'm really interested in. And so taking that universal story of like a kid who's struggling with his mental health and putting it in Mumbai is really interesting, because you get to go, what does the Mumbai version of that story look like? And luckily I've spent enough time in the city and I know enough people where we can have those conversations about what the visual reference points for that journey is.
Great. Thank you, sir.
All right, with that I think we'll have to conclude. I'm getting prompts to wrap this up.
I'll see all of you at the stall. Please come and say hello. Please. I want to go home with an empty suitcase.
Big round of applause for Nikesh. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.